the participants attempt to make themselves really part of the entire group, and make this session really, as we did last year, a real conversation between everyone who is here, and to think about the dialogues we've had the past 2 days, the incredibly rich presentations, but also the many questions that you have asked and that you wanted to ask that you haven't yet gotten to ask, but other things that might emerge, particularly between the speakers at the hub, because I feel like the format allows for this really wonderful deep sharing over 2 days, but not necessarily consistently for a dialogue between the group that's gathered. And so I don't want to actually say very much. This is my moment to kind of sit back and let the conversation really flow. But I do want to kind of maybe start it off by, we've had an opening provocation from Sabi that got a lot of responses about the archive. So thanks, Sabi, for just putting that there. And there's tons more to say on that. But I actually want to maybe think a little bit with everyone about...
But before we do that, can we just give you a big round?
I want to ask maybe a sort of weird conservative question about the role of exhibition making in curatorial work, something that I guess many people still imagine to be a core part of it, that is, as Tarini said, the kind of beautiful, alluring thing about it for people who walk into those spaces. And of course, we hope that these discussions and these kinds of platforms also allow us to think a bit more and be critical and enact certain measures in order to really address the conditions of possibility and production that those kinds of projects entail. And here I mean exhibitions in kind of a very broad sense, not necessarily a museum exhibition, but an exhibition as a possibility of an encounter in space with something that has the capacity to produce a kind of a radical relationality between the subject and the thing. And so I want to ask anyone and all of us to maybe talk a little bit about where, even if we are more interested in process than product, so to speak, but where does that stand in your imagination of the work that you're doing today? Sapake.
Oh, great.
When you smile at me like that.
This is a big topic to end with, I guess. I think one of the things I noted quite early on in my trajectory is, and I think I was recounting this to Zoe, that I really loved everything leading up to the opening of the exhibition. The research, the thinking about the thing, what is the thing, and then something emerging into the world. But I used to experience a kind of sadness as soon as the opening. And I wanted to find a way of creating, a publicness to that richness that I felt that I experienced between myself and the artist. But the thing is, obviously, the exhibition is the thing. That's meant to be the thing. So recognizing this hidden part, maybe, of the process as something that could be maybe possibly public. And also, for me, that was the curatorial work, actually, is the kind of the contextualization, the framing, the thinking about how this thing emerges into the world. So I think there's lots of discussions around the kind of detritus of exhibition making And you never forget an incredible or a great exhibition. I never forget seeing Okri's actually Grandeur Biennial. Just the kind of, for me, the lyrical choreography between the pieces, the way that affects you emotionally is something, that I think is, if you get the chance to have that experience, to be able to be an exhibition maker in that sense, I think it's harder these days.
Yeah. At this point.
Can I add to that? I think I always used to think that the exhibition is sort of the end of a journey, when everybody has contributed to it and so on. But I came to realize over the last couple of years that it's a moment of handover of sorts. Especially, like, for example, when you look at exhibitions with material where perhaps not enough research has been done yet. And then the exhibition can be a moment to share something for the first time with a public, with other researchers, and you can hope that it kicks something off. And then you need to negotiate how much you still want to be involved or not. If it's, let's say, an artist show or a contemporary artist that you're showing, there's a lot happening after for that person also. And how does the institution or the curator remain part of that journey, what comes after the exhibition?
I mean, an exhibition is still the central economy within a museum / gallery / institutional space. It's we sometimes we also have to take ourselves out of the centralization of that, because it's where the cafe team have their clientele coming in. It's where the retail team, all of these parts of the ecosystem also live on the exhibition hall, on that aspect of the curatorial. And, like, one of the kind of big things that's in crisis at the moment is the survival of print publication. And that's also changed so much because, institutions have to be doing less in terms of exhibition making, because it's more expensive to put on shows, because geopolitical crises, the cost of fuel, the cost of staff, and so on. And so that has there's, of course, print has an entire other complicated ecology in terms of production that's making it harder to sustain. There's also the rise of the digital, but that survival of that also lands on the physical experience of seeing the exhibition. So it's also your largest catchment zone in terms of audience or public or, visitor, or however you want to term it. It's, one of the big, crises that's happening in the UK and other parts of the world is again, this reintroduction of speaking about exhibitions as blockbusters in order to survive. How do you hit the largest demographic of people? Who are the people that are cash rich enough to spend between £14 and £30 for a museum show? So, it's like, I think sometimes it's also about peeling off, like, what we understand the curatorial to be, in order to be truly collaborative across all aspects of people that contribute just as much in different ways to our wider ecosystem as well.
So
I don't know if my mic is working.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you guys have already heard why I'm suspicious of, I don't call myself an exhibition maker.
Yeah.
But my own dilemma with it is, Jeb shared earlier that our art market in Thailand is very poor. My whole career I've battled with, why is the Southeast Asian market so low in price, visibility, quantity on an international market? And then you think about the trend, the exotic trend right now. Let's include Southeast Asia. It's very trendy right now. But then if you look at the available material in English and you try to see where's the exhibitions happening in Southeast Asia, it's very difficult, because what is showcased as art doesn't have a label as exhibition. So the festival making in Southeast Asia is rich. And the festival making is where a lot of the contemporary artists today are getting funded to experiment, but it's highly ephemeral. And after the festival finishes, it's gone. Poof. Now, no one's writing about it. No one labels it as a show curated by.
But it's highly curated and it's highly produced,
Yeah.
but it doesn't enter the lexicon of contemporary art. So I think part of the dilemma is, what do we define as an exhibition, right? Where do we find those exhibitions? And I mean, Sepaka and I, we've had long conversations about the desire for the exhibition to begin with the artist before they know anything. And what happens if that is made public? That whole space of the journey is somewhat made accessible, and that the exhibition begins at that point.
Yeah.
So I think there's a necessity to unpack what this frame is, because just looking at the West and their understandings of a museum does not fit most of the global South.
Right. Which is why I said I think this is something that we should talk about in a capacious way, because I think there is something about recognizing the possibility of those encounters in spaces. If we think of the festival, if we think of the street, we think of various manifestations where those encounters between ideas, people, and in some cases objects happen. There is still something alluring about that within the work of the curatorial, which may not necessarily look the same everywhere. But then it also, I think, comes back maybe to, since you mentioned ephemerality, those things that do disappear. Certainly museum exhibitions also disappear. They don't last forever. But how do we record and register them, or let them pass, should that be?
Just to add one other thing, just 2 weekends ago, I held a discussion in Chiang Mai with 6 different festival goers makers from across Thailand, deep south, far north, the northeast, center. And it was really interesting. They're all very young. They're all under 40. They're working off a smut of an oily rag. They have no money, but they do this nearly annually every year, and they're amazing. But if you ask them, all this work, who are you speaking towards with this work? You produce for artists. Like, who is looking? Who are you making it for? They're only thinking of that local in situ. So on the one hand, if you were an external researcher, you could look in and say, wow, this is amazing. But then the ambition level on the ground is not forward, outward thinking. So we've got a disjuncture happening. And this is quite common across Southeast Asia.
So just to kind of, I'm sorry, please go on.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
For me, I think when I took over this work at Coast Institute Meli, suddenly thought in this period, I'm going to make the most of my entire life. And I think every time I'm tasked or I come up with a project, I always have this question: how can I make this not look like an exhibition? It is, and always trying to kind of escape this exhibition industrial complex. And one of the actually projects that I wanted to share when I had time yesterday is a one by Jabu Anel that I invited to Meli, knowing that he's somebody who works very slowly, builds relationships, and will just add a connector to the team that I hardly knew, and someone that I knew before and worked with. And I think that's also a curatorial rule that I have, that I don't leave my obsessions at home. So taking somebody that I know to stand next to, and he kind of built something that was there at the opening to be destroyed and to build something else over a period of four months. So he was not in residency necessarily, and he would come on Monday or Tuesday, but sometimes whenever he wants to come, to kind of construct the space, bake a cake, share it with the team. And it was really beautiful because it brought someone I know very well closer to the team I hardly quite knew, and with this kind of beautiful gestures. And that's something that I'm always looking for, but sometimes,
you work with an artist, they want to make an exhibition, and it's beautiful, and then it's there. And I see it maybe twice because I hardly go upstairs, you know. But with Jabu's project, you know, I was always curious what changed. And I was hoping that this also influences this idea of numbers. Exhibitions are expensive to make. In the Netherlands, we are guided by a fair pay system. So you have to pay artists a certain amount of money. We cannot go around it, which I think is great.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot of money. I've never seen it anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Which basically means that exhibitions have to last longer. But how then do you keep people interested, you know, over a period of 6 months? And I think that project by Jabu answered that question for me. But it's not an everyday thing. So it's a constant question.
Yeah. Cubby. It's actually picking up from Zoe to say that a lot of my journeys began with the Asia Art Archive, where we were looking at the archive and research not as a means to an end, which would come out in a publication or exhibition, but the archive itself as a medium for art making. And something a friend and an art historian, Santosh Sadhana, said very brilliantly many years ago was to see the switch that's happened from research for practice to research as practice, in which once that takes place, then exhibitions become very important moments to catalyze and socialize things rather than as end products.
And practice as researchers.
And practice as research as well. I mean, there's that side too. So at least with AA, there was a whole, and I think that just continues to inform my thinking and many of my peers as well. And so then the exhibition doesn't bear the weight of some end product, but rather sometimes actually this is when the work begins. This is when the fun begins also. And that leads me to one other project from many years later in 2020 in Delhi, and maybe some people in this room may have been part of it, which was conceived by Rats Media Collective called 5 Million Incidents. And this was a kind of proposition for bringing practices together, not to occupy space, but how do we occupy time together, where time becomes the architecture, or propositions are made for proposing geometries of time that we can inhabit together, that we can fold ourselves into together, like the back seats of Innovas, folding in and out and things like that, right? So, which all of us have been shuffling. So, in that case, I mean, it's just to say that one always thinks of art actually as a philosophical proposition. And if art is philosophy, then exhibitions become a place where many philosophies are congealing and speaking to each other with a lot of money involved. But then their kind of influence cannot be read just as any philosophical work in its own time. Because even at AA, we learned that for this whole KPI economy and thing, we'll have to redefine it because our work will be based on, or the value of our work will be based on citations many years from now. From within the community, but who knows from how many disciplines. And so exhibitions then becoming actually propositions for new encounters with philosophical concepts that are physical, that are tangible, and that encompass many intangibles within. I mean, I've always at least tried to practice and bring that in.
Any other responses from here? I actually want to open it up. We have an hour. I feel like this should be a really big conversation with the rest of the room as well. And so if there are questions, we have one here in the pit. Yeah, and there's something online.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with Kabir, and then we go online, and then we go back there.
Rats often say, in fact, that an exhibition is for 8.4 billion people that inhabit the planet.
Yeah.
In some talk, I'm probably misquoting, but something like that.
8 million people.
Yeah, plus
What? 8
And what?
Go for it.
My name's Kabir.
Yeah.
My question sort of leads on from Ratan's prompt. I hope I'm not going to reiterate it, but lead it somewhere else. But, throughout the two excellent days, a lot of the subjects that we've covered include geographies, material conditions of exhibition making, infrastructure, institutions. I don't think we've had a really serious debate around aesthetics, which I think is interesting. You guys might disagree, but I feel like other conversations have sort of superseded this, or certainly, dominated. Years ago. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me change the mic.
Yeah, just swap mics for a sec. Thank you, guys.
Whereas if we had this conference maybe 30 or 40 years ago, we would really be speaking about dominant modes of aesthetics, which artists and which artworks are more relevant, more intriguing, which styles, which genres. And, this really speaks to this current moment, obviously, in which we are very concerned about the material conditions of exhibition making, curatorial practice. It's sort of moved into something else. But at the same time, I'm an art critic and a journalist. A routine criticism that comes of a lot of biennials today is that they lack concrete positions for the public. Curatorial fuzziness is one of these words that's being thrown around right now. And Tarini and Sapaki, you both spoke very lucidly around the fact that the conditions of what we see is totally as important as what we see, and actually the same thing. But I wonder whether the conversation around material conditions and how we see things is superseding the conversation around what they are. That.
Who wants to start? Biennial choice.
I'm sorry.
You can get that way.
I actually spoke about aesthetics. I spoke about art.
That's why you got the mic.
At least I'm the least guilty one here.
We also mentioned data aesthetics as well, so it wasn't devoid, but I feel like
Yeah.
The mic was. Oh, there you go. Because you don't have a mic.
Oh. But Mustafa, I think it's true that, it would be interesting to hear that the kind of idea even of tropical as an aesthetic proposition.
Yeah.
Is that something?
You have a mic.
You have one. You're wired.
That was the point, that it wasn't an aesthetic proposition.
Yeah.
It is only relevant because of its slipperiness. And the fact that it is evoked by artists at a moment in time when artists themselves have taken on the role of launching into polemics. So, for instance, to give you an example, the image that I showed of Pato Mehta standing in front of this banner. Behind, if you read the text more closely, is an excerpt from a document that was written by the Indonesian modernist kind of freedom fighter, Sujoyono. And the plot is this, right? Since we speak about aesthetics. A Dutch art critic arrives in Batavia. It is 1945. Indonesia declares itself independent in 47. And this Indonesian art critic says, there is no art in Indonesia. How can there be? Right?
You mean
In light of...
You mean
The Dutch art critic says, there is no art in Indonesia. How can there be? In light of everything that has happened in Europe. And of course, Sujoyono, who is also running for, he's part of the freedom fighting movement, really literally take up arms, not the kind of paper, isn't and he launches into this polemic. And he writes, we know where we will be taking Indonesian art. I actually wanted to read it today, but I ran out of time. But there is one moment in the text where he says that we will liken your work to a shipwreck. Speaking to Europe. And we know that around the shipwreck we can navigate. So the shipwreck is not entirely useless. It has use. And we will navigate around it and we will move. And you know how? Because then moments later he shifts code. And he says, because not only can I speak Dutch as well as you, I also have my own language. So I am far more relevant in this time. So he says, and he ends by saying, thank you for your contributions. We will take art forward now. So if you want to really speak about the aesthetics, right, I just wanted to respond to the question of the exhibition. Only for 10 years, I quietly curated the long-term displays of the National Gallery, which is a kind of a 20th century survey of Southeast Asian art. And I came to realize one thing, that actually I'm not interested in showing the process. Yeah, I'm completely uninterested in. I did that in my previous life at the University Museum. I came to realize that actually what I want is to be present on the day the exhibition opens and talk to the public. And have a stool and sit down. And I still do that, right? And I know curators who work with me, sometimes they agree with me, they disagree with me. I don't force anybody to do anything in that regard, but I am present. I don't go and leave, right? I'm there for the full duration of the show, and then you have a debate. Come, let's talk. So this is the place of the exhibition to me. It is sight, like let's talk, right? And I feel that more than ever, the exhibition is important because it is also the site that is censored, attacked. So if it was useless, why would you censor and attack it? That means there is potency still, a little bit. And it can be a great site for thinking and maybe, hopefully, some dreaming. Yeah. So, yeah, I hope it answers your question. Yeah.
But Nikhil, do you want to say something about
Well, as an artist, right, always sort of held that true to myself to say that the relationship to beauty is a starting place, and politicking that happens because of choices one is making around those notions of beauty is where that comes afterwards. So the invitation to the self, to draw oneself into this poetic act of making, is also an invitation then to the people that you're presenting the work to, as an invitation to draw them in first, to make people feel comfortable first with discomfort. I mean, make them feel comfortable with the discomfort that you want to deliver. Because there is a certain amount of, I guess, an artistic experience promises a certain amount of safety. Safety in the sense that you will not physically harm you. You might trouble you intellectually. But that comfort, I think, has to come from the way in which the art is presented. And I think that's one of the mantras that we follow when we were inviting practices to the Biennale. We were thinking about what is it that we are seduced by, right? And through that seduction, we then found ourselves delivering the message. So it's for me, the relationship between making, the desire to make, and then and what is it? What is the context of what it is that I'm doing? Are the aesthetic precedes the politics. It's always been that way, and that's the model I think that we followed when we invited practices to the Biennale.
precedes?
Precedes. I mean, just like music is.
I just have an image in my head of 2012, Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, and I'm at San Art, and I was training two younger curators. They'd put on a lovely show, both floors, and the Asia Society of New York and their board of trustees came to visit. 12 people. And I said to these two young curators, give a tour. And they had really worked quite hard to think about the aesthetic arguments of these, I think it was a group show of some 6 or 7 local artists. And I thought they'd done a great job in articulating something in relation to Vietnamese art histories. And these board of trustees walked around going, oh, it's kind of reminding me of this. Oh, it's kind of reminding me of that. Oh, terrible application of X. And, you know, I was so annoyed. And they were quite rude, and they eventually just about left the door. And then the then director says, "Oh, Zoe, would you mind sharing the context of censorship in Vietnam, please?" So then I shared a little bit about the context of censorship. They all walked back in. They all re-looked at the work. And the very people who said this had reminded me of X ended up purchasing the work they said that it was derivative. Now, this is not the only occasion that this happened to me. You call curatorial fuzziness. Who's listening? And who is actually allowing a reread of something they're assuming of a root? So that it needs to be spun back the other way as well. There's a lot of people trying to speak about their own aesthetics and being immediately redetermined in ways that is not fair. It's total damn rude.
Yeah.
And it puts censorship on a level of exotification that is catapulted into market and inflating conversations that is not the artistic intent.
Yeah. So the aesthetic is not a decontextualized.
Just to say one thing, sometimes this fuzziness, maybe I won't use that word, but that also exists because we are operating in contexts where censorship is real.
Yes.
Right? So I think to claim that curators are being fuzzy, I feel is a bit. So I do think that there is that discussion. Like there are certain things we just can't say, but we still say them.
And after that visit, those two curators took another 6 months to be honest.
Sure.
Can you blame them?
Sure.
Damaging.
Sure, okay, let's say something.
I think we can we make it.
Go speak again.
I think in Thailand, I mean, in the last, like in the 90s, I remember we really have a problem. I think around Southeast Asia, when people started to stop painting and do something, a so-called, adopting the new language of installation, something else. I remember when there was the first Chiang Mai social installation, which is a public art program in the north. The newspaper, they wrote the article like, "Is it art?" So this kind of the defining the way the younger artists back then, started to do something different, like Montiet Budma, using local materials, and create the installation. That was kind of 30 years ago, right? And I found that the younger, not the younger, like mid-career artists in Thailand and a few from Southeast Asia, we started to kind of discuss about like where are we gonna go after this, right? Because at the end of the day, when you go to different biennales or the big exhibitions, it look all the same. Kochi, Thailand Biennale, or Bangkok Art Biennale, or like Venice, especially the last 2-3 editions of Venice, especially this one. I didn't go yet, but I'm gonna go and check it out. Some international European curator based in Bangkok said, "Oh, you know what? Like, it was so horrible. We don't understand. And we will create our own cultural event. Blah blah blah." So I think this kind of new the diversity of the visual language, or aesthetic from especially the global south is really troubling. And I think we make a really kind of we really be able to shake those aesthetic kind of the perception of aesthetic from the Western sense, and that they really have a problem with that, right? So I think that of course diversity is great, but for me the question is more like what's next? What is the next step for all of us, right? And of course context is important, and it's our job, instead of being as an Ausstellungsmacher, or the exhibition maker. We have to be mediated, and it is good to be have to be present. And if we cannot be present, and other people should be able to, able to explain, or give context to the audience or the communities, right? And that was for me is very important, to just explain, what kind of context are the given condition, right, of the artist who you're working with, and where, right? And that was my take.
Yeah. There's lots of other questions. You want to say the online one, and then we'll go back.
This one is it.
The union done.
Oh, yeah.
There are many online questions all of a sudden, but I'll just ask one to start with.
Yeah.
This is from Neil. If this is for Nikhil. If Kerala were to undergo a significant political shift with a right-wing government coming to power, as we are witnessing in many parts of the country, how do you think your curatorial approach would change?
Yeah.
Would the themes, the choice of artists, the way difficult conversations are presented, or even the role of the Biennale itself evolve? I'm asking this from the perspective of Bengal. Many of us who work in art and culture here find ourselves in a period of introspection and reassessment. As people who value critical thought and public dialogue, we're trying to understand the role of artists, curators, and cultural institutions, what the role should be in changing political landscapes.
I don't think Kerala is in isolation in terms of where the subcontinent is going, or essentially where the world is going, even though we were very aware of the fact that we were probably in one of the last few corners left where dissent and difficult conversations were still able to be had. I think that you can't look at Kerala from this position of last year, last 2 years, what it'll be tomorrow. Kerala has always withstood a certain kind of power, a hegemonic power, a power that has wanted to consume it, subsume it, extract from it. It's thousands of years of trade and influence. I think Kerala has the ability to hold its own. I think governments come and governments go. Right wing comes and the right wing will go. But at the end of the day, I think it's very important to note that Kerala has the ability to be able to withstand that change and hold on to what it is that is important to itself. And I think that awareness is what we brought into when we were curating this exhibition. The other thing that I don't like to do is to assume the audience, is to assume their position. Because as soon as you start to do that, you start to dilute and water down your ideas and what it is that you want to communicate. I think it's important to think about the highest common denominator, the most intelligent person that you will expect to encounter. So I think that Kerala's self-awareness and its internal intelligence is much stronger, I think, than the way in which the world swings to the left and then swings to the right. And, these are ebbs and flows in the ways in which power plays itself out. And would I change the way in which we curated this exhibition? No, we wouldn't, because we were already aware that we are working in a very fraught world. And we were already aware, and I think a lot of the artists that we invited were masters of subversion. And that is what we do as artists. We have the ability to dodge those bullets because we are living in a different matrix.
Let's send the mic back. We have 2 questions. That's I guess.
But there's a question over there.
The back. Early on.
There was early on.
Yeah. With someone talk.
Hi, my name is Shamsri. I am presently based in Kolkata. I'm a practicing artist and a sustainability enthusiast, and I integrate materials into my work. I have saved up my observations, questions, and a disagreement for this session. It's a friendly disagreement. First is for Shabir. Thank you for your dark humor. It bit its teeth into the insights you're sharing. I have 2 questions for you. One is, you started off your session saying that you are suspicious of the continental or the continents. So my question to you is, what is that suspicion about, if you can elaborate? And what is the antithesis? So in contrast, if you say the islands, so can you fill in the dots about what's the antithesis to suspicion about the islands? So this is for you.
Very honest.
Okay.
Can you rephrase that second part again? Fully understand.
You said you are suspicious of the continents. My question to you, A, is can you elaborate on the nature of the suspicion. And the second part is, you also spoke about being on the islands. And somehow I felt that that's where your level of confidence or trust comes from. But my question to you is, if the word you chose for the continents is suspicion, what is the word that you choose for islands?
Do you believe in the archipelago?
Right. First question. I'll go with the second first, which is the ability to escape and float away, right? The island provides that. Almost to the extent that the moment you see the horizon, you know you have to run. You have to rethink, because you may be reaching a point of knowing, and maybe that point of knowing is far too serious to be taken seriously. The first question, should I go for it? You see, I grew up in Sri Lanka, and I grew up at a time of not just the civil war, but also a time of Indian intervention in Sri Lanka. The Indian peacekeeping force came. And I have kind of been suspicious of the arrival of continental powers on islands. So that is the suspicion. Thank you for asking. In all the due, I was asking Sabi before my talk, should I reveal this? He said, go for it. But I didn't. So thank you for asking the question. That it comes from there. It comes from a memory, a trace that I have. Right?
But that trace has historical baggage as well. I mean, in the sense
Yeah, you could go all the way back, right? But that's the kind of memory trace that I carry. Yeah. So that's the kind of, you can sense it. You can sense continental powers tend to intervene far more in global politics.
When you say curate a curate on an island, relatively unlike by big but intervention gives you down to nature.
We will just repeat it, I think.
I'll just repeat it quickly because you're asking if being on an island might give you more an ability to be.
An innovation isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, has it given you a sense of?
Does it give a certain kind of freedom to do your work?
Maybe it's a false sense of freedom.
Yeah.
There's islands and then there's
There's no good guys.
There's continents and
There's, and there was an islandation that arrived here some time ago as well.
Yes, so which we recall faintly, right? I have a faint memory of that.
Exactly. Let's take the question from there.
My name is Vishal. I know some of the folks here. I have a few questions. I have like 10, but I'll ask 2. I'm an artist and a curator. I'm in Bangalore, and I think my questions are maybe for everybody, but one is about longevity, and that's something that I'm curious about hearing more of your experiences, how you've managed that and navigated some of that. I know some of you personally, and I know some of your careers and others I've admired from afar. The reason I'm asking that question, and I'll go into my second one, the context is that in India, at least, we don't have a lot of public institutions, right? We have public-facing ones, but they're private. The collections are private. The money is private. Sometimes operate like fiefdoms. A lot of times operates like fiefdoms. And the question I think that we have, that's a problem that's not really addressed or comes up, is about caste. There is a predominant social hierarchy that predates colonization. Indian art history is mostly Brahminical upper caste art history. So is contemporary practice. A lot of the practice comes from groups that have the faculty of language, capital. So these are conditions that are also present in Southeast Asia. So that's kind of why I'm asking about longevity, how you're navigating around that, how you're thinking about that, what kind of things you may be able to share that you've been able to use both from a pragmatic sense, but also how do you maintain your integrity and ideology there? The other one I think is a bit more nerdy, and that's more for Sipaki and Eva. It's a little bit about the role of the itinerant institution, and something that I have a personal, like just a relationship with Rivington Place and being at Eva as a student and getting radicalized in Eva. I think something that I've noticed is that we don't have a kind of intellectual institution in our country. We have a dominant caste set of institutions that speak about artistry and modernity and all of these things from the position of an oppressor, but not so much from a history of radicalism, a radical history and a radical present leading towards a radical futurity. Right? That is the role that I've kind of seen in Eva been, and it's kind of what a lot of us from marginalized groups in India, Dalit, who are Adivasi, people who come from the subcontinent, who are the numerical majority here, these are the institutions we look at. So I'm kind of interested in, there is a connection here between how we do pragmatism and how an institution like Iniva keeps going. And that's kind of where I want to consider.
Do you want to take many questions and then?
Well, that's already many questions. So let's take those and then we'll take another one. Yeah. Annika, do you want to talk about longevity institutions and?
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. But I mean, we talk about this quite often, and we are also trying to figure it out. There are a couple of instances in the last years, like when I joined the museum, for example, there was the first permanent exhibition to go up, and there was a selection of artworks that was handed over to me, which were about, I think, 500 artworks. And the exhibition was supposed to be about the representation of women in Indian art. And I think from these 500 artworks, about 460 were by male makers. So it felt like a moment, okay, we have to start from scratch again. And since we're starting again, we may as well look at other things as well. And the question of caste came up. And then you realize that a lot of the pre-modern works, a lot of the textiles, of course, have a lot of caste context to them. But that's perhaps not what you're hinting at, and that's not what we're talking about. So it feels like a dissatisfactory moment to really, enter that conversation. And the other thing is that there's private money and there's private money. And our institution, for example, we work grant-based, we work donation-based. And we continuously write proposals. It's sometimes more proposal writing than exhibition curation. And we really came to feel over the last couple of months that the people who are sitting in the office, they are quite diverse. We've paid attention to hiring early on. But still, the people who write the proposal are English speaking, sort of higher educated, and so on. And the question of caste, the question of so many other things actually happen at the proposal writing stage. And it matters who sits at the table in that moment. And at the same time, we are not really clear how to change those timelines, who to ask to come to the table. Often you write proposals and the project doesn't come through. And there are funders who are willing to give really long timelines for proposal writing where something like that is actually possible. But then just the machine that a museum is doesn't allow you to kind of like go out, find the right people to add to the conversation. But in my mind, that is actually what needs to happen. That at the beginning, at the very beginning, the seed of an idea, the moment where you even start asking for the money is where these perspectives need to come in.
Okay. Gabi, you want to say something?
I wanted to respond to this question of longevity, which is also a question of sustainability in a way.
And one of the things that attracted me to Meli is the fact that every 6 years there's a new director, so you cannot stay for more than 6 years.
Such a great.
And so it kind of like gives you that time frame, which you know it's not extendable.
Yeah.
To work within. And I also have a very different relationship to that sustainability or staying longer in the game. because I come from South Africa, and I was very obsessed by the Johannesburg Biennale.
Right.
My obsession with it is that it didn't last. Is that it happened in 1995 and then in 1997, created by Oprah Winfrey. And for a long time, and I think with CHR, we were quite obsessed by this time frame, which is why, after 2 years, we decided to end it.
Yeah.
But also we're thinking about like the end of things, and that sometimes the end is not a crisis.
Yes.
It's an opening, it's a portal. There's something else that's going to happen. It doesn't have to be a crisis. And that doesn't mean that I don't like permanence, one of the first things I had to celebrate at Meli is the 35 years of the institution being around. And I think those things, if they work, they need to be celebrated. But at the same time, I'm really attracted to ephemerality as well. Things kind of like collapsing.
Exactly.
And then what comes out of the debris can be also of interest.
Yeah.
Ineva.
What was the question? Ineva.
Well, we're talking about institutions and collapsing and rebirth.
Was it a sustainability question?
Longevity. I think for with Ineva, it was actually about the kind of space of organization.
An organization that moves.
Sorry, what?
As a temporary organization, it has a physical space now. It's split into two, but I think it's something that's been at the kind of the substructure of conversation in politics and discourse in the UK.
Yeah, because the thing is, I feel like Ineva exists almost as a container for the Arts Council to say, oh, but we did something for you people. There's an institution, go over there, so that we don't have to actually do the work. So there's an element actually also where I see Ineva can be instrumentalized as doing the work for everybody else, which doesn't make sense. So, and I think there's always been this slight difference and distinction between the funding that went into it and what it was meant to achieve from the funder's point of view. And Gavin Janchas, who was in exile from South Africa, what he put into it, and this idea of new internationalism. And also the franchises that were started by the artists, by Sunil Gupta, Rashid Arain and Eddie Chambers, these experimental platforms that happened before Ineva. And then the incoming of Jelaine Tewodros, the director. Mm-hmm. So all of these different intentionalities of what this institution should be and could do, it was trying to do too much, I think, because it was trying to rewrite or revision a history that included those that should have been included but hadn't been included. So it had to do this historical revisionist work, which is still something I think is a continual process. Actually, it was also at the same time addressing the need of artists who, for whatever reason, could not be exhibited elsewhere because their work were bringing in questions of identity politics, but also histories that Britain refuses to acknowledge. So, how can we talk about partition because it's not in our education curriculum? So if an artist is bringing up, histories within their work, it felt like, Ineva can deal with that. So as well as anti-racism, as well as decolonizing. It's like this is one institution. Actually, all of the institutions need to think through the processes of the kind of revisioning of histories, actually. And I was a little bit surprised to hear about some of the institutions in London and the first time Kerry James Marshall, I mean, actually had a show in the UK, was I think at Chisenhall Gallery, and brought by two independent curators, and Deborah Smith and Fowler is the last name. Kate, thank you. And so just recognizing, I guess, the labor that independent curators and artists have been doing for a long time to not only open up spaces, not only the writing and the publishing, and recognizing that if they didn't write themselves in or create spaces or open up spaces, that actually Innova probably wouldn't exist, actually, because it rides on the back of all of the work that was happening up until that point. Yeah.
Okay. Can I, Sunshine? Oh, sure. Do you want to? Just a comment, and then he hasn't asked one either. Sunshine.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Because I think the last question over in part, yeah.
Yeah, that's a question. Once.
After, he's just going to comment, and then you go. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And if you look at Vishal,
Yes.
I think the question of cost is very, very important. And I think if we're talking about longevity, at least in the subcontinent that's here in India, the longevity of its continuous invisibilization is certainly going on, because, I mean, there's major art historians, Gary Tartikoff, currently via Salone, so many people. But I think what makes it, and the elephant in the room, so to speak, is because, talking about aesthetics, it requires a complete aesthetic redistribution. And I don't mean this in style or visual styles or visual language or anything, but literally self-positioning, self-imaging of the oppressive caste, not just the oppressed caste, because otherwise it goes into this ticking the box of, okay, we've got these many artists. I do think currently in the art scene in India, there is a very vibrant, and it's been going on, but very concentrated now in the milieu of practitioners who are very vocal about this, who are both carrying out a representative role, but more importantly, carrying out the work of that aesthetic political redistribution in the spaces that they inhabit, and they practice it. And I think the institutions and curators need to catch up, but also the wider art community of artists. Because if the visual arts is about how to make something visible, caste is not about color. It's not about some kind of marker. It is, in fact, inscribed heavily within the matrix, all of positionalities. And so I think there's a lot of work already out there. And it's really the work of institutions, curators, and the rest of the art community to catch up. You can see in literature, in cinema, in theater, it's been explosive through and through, and it's been explosive both aesthetically, in the kind of language poets would use, in the kind of theatrical codes that theater would break or make, and in the visual arts, you just see, or the contemporary art space is just constantly kept invisibilized because it kind of brings in everyone's implication in this. And no one knows how to, or no one wants to deal with it.
So how to untangle yourself from it.
Yeah. Or first of all, accepting your entanglement with it if you're from a kind of position of oppressive castes, and then see how do we rework this.
Yeah.
So I think it continues to be the elephant in the room. And yet it's spoken everywhere, all around. Milieu, the artists, there's just so many people. I mean, I just see it in Delhi so much. And I know Clark House was in Maharashtra, in Bombay, just so many places. Yeah.
But there is also, I think, this risk, which, I mean, the Innova example is kind of making me think about in terms of what does it mean to create institutions or to try to create structures that have to take on the work of doing that as something that then funders and other kinds of people can kind of come around, almost an unrealistic expectation in terms of what structurally is possible in the models that we currently have, right? I mean, I'm just putting that on the table because the instrumentalization is very possible in both directions. Also, sometimes these radical positions need to instrumentalize the funding bodies to make their agendas. But sometimes the expectation, when it becomes this large kind of historical, social, political problem to deal with through the lens of making something. I think the Clark House example is very interesting to me because oftentimes I feel that there is a certain kind of position many of those artists have had to articulate and put themselves in as well, as a kind of instrumentalization or a certain kind of identity politics that I think is by the system, by the kind of demands of visibility, and by the actually, interestingly, the stakes of the aesthetic. Like, how does your aesthetic speak to your identity, and a kind of demand of the system for certain artists to always speak to that, right? And I think, yeah. And so I think we have so many womanhood or black. Yeah, and I think those positions are still really kind of something we have to consider.
These things are often talked about as, they're very complex. They're not. You just resist. I'm not talking. No. It's just making it sound like it's that email someone talked about, that this is not going to change until people in this boardroom. Yeah. Right. That are not. That don't represent.
So I think the thing that's making that just a little bit more complicated is, look at the leader of the Conservative Party right now.
Right.
So I think for me, it's actually, there is sometimes a refusal to consider what the politics of the spaces that we're inhabiting and our ability to create infrastructures that allow for whatever shifts or changes that we're, when we're talking about equity.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about how things operate here, but are there ways in which people who have access to power are able to redistribute that power? It's a question.
Yeah.
Sunshine, sorry for keeping you.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
First of all, really thanks to Ratan Amal for coordinating and bringing all these great panelists together. And it was really enriching especially for me, to know how curation operates within diverse institutional forms also, and that each one needs different kinds of care and ways of engagement. My question was a little bit on the way you started about the exhibition making, but more on the notion of time, because last, I think, around 10 years now, this opening up of this whole notion of exhibition being a kind of a performative, process-based, emerging into different kinds of timelines. Some works which are already have created a certain viewership within its own method of representation, but some are unfolding in the process of the exhibition. And so how the notion of viewership is also, how you are imagining the idea of viewership in such kind of exhibition making, especially within the institutional spaces, because it requires very different kinds of time-based relationship of experiencing the process also. So in that context, because when it's not a critique, but about sometimes biennales are being critiqued as who is the audience for whom the biennale is being made? Is it for the local community who comes there for maybe 7 times to see the show, or is it for a person who is passing by, and there's a certain kind of temporality that, and the ephemerality of the work process is itself, engaging with the viewership in a different way. So if you could reflect a little bit that how, and also I think this has pushed the idea of exhibition also, like what does it mean? Because in many of the private galleries also, the notion of timeline has changed. There are some galleries which are open for 15 days and some are keeping a show for 3 months. So what is the kind of curatorial intervention that goes behind to the idea of viewership when you are imagining a certain kind of an exhibition within a certain format? Because those are also very varied kind of structures, I think.
Yeah. Who wants to start? I actually kind of want to go back to what you said, Jal, in kind of connecting what Sunshine's asking in a way to what you said about what's been happening at major biennials in the last few years, decades, even maybe now, to think about some of the kinds of works and propositions that are being made being resisted or not understood because the kind of temporality, the expectation of the visitor is being frustrated by those structures. I feel like there was a really significant conversation to be had around that, for example, at one group as Documenta, which was sadly not possible because of what kind of shouted that conversation out. But I think they were trying to do something there that actually was radically restructuring what a visitor might expect to encounter.
Is that different direction in which the idea of exhibition in the day also? I mean, assuming the stereotypes were within, it's one collection and you come also the elite and want to come, like in a museum there is.
Yeah.
I'm going to see that. But also this form of exhibition that can encounter something in a certain way. Or that it's maybe different tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or later it can go.
Or that you don't come from elsewhere. The exhibition is, I mean, I think even with the project that you're doing in the North now.
I think when I remember I was talking with Kitagawa, Frank Kitagawa, who's very important, on producing multiple triennials in Japan. And I asked him, like, why do we need more triennials? Like, why? Because the art will always ask, like, we don't need more biennales. In the past, I also, keep asking this question. But when I started to work with him, in the middle of nowhere, in Seto Islands, or Aichi-Gozumari, it was really like, it's kind of interesting the way that Japanese city, they use art, to really kind of, they use the term revitalizing the city, right? Especially in Aichi-Gozumari, which is where he comes from. It is Niigata, which is about like 2-3 hours from Tokyo. And they have a highest rate of people commit suicide, and a lot of like unhappy aging society. So after they brought back the works, like every 3 years. I mean, one of the producer of the show, which is the owner of Benesse House and multiple museum in Nagoshima, said the only thing we want is the smile, of the local people. That we want local people to be happy. Okay, this is what he said. I said, wow, this is it's totally changed my my ideas of like why we have so many biennales. And then when I work with Thailand Biennale, another good friends, from Italy, also, why you invite this like A-list artists and like, so many like big stars, to show in Chiang Rai. We have more artists. I said, you know what? My people, there is no one in Chiang Rai I know that, I'm going to go to Venice Biennale. I want to go to Documenta. It's not everyone, can have that access, right, to the artwork, right? So this is like, for me, the first priority is my people, local people, like Chiang Rai people, Thai people, regional, and international, right? So it's really difficult to serve like totally different community. It means that what kind of artworks and artists that you are going to invite, you're going to present. So it's like 30-40% is going to be local artists and Thai artists, and then regional and then international. We want, local people to experience these kind of, exposure, because they are also entitled to see this kind of work, right? And especially it's the taxpayers' money, and it's all free, So the way that we do this, the exhibition of Biennale, we really have to think about this. How can I use the taxpayers' money, to really like give this access to people, and it's also relevant. It's also like, it's not something that is totally alien from them, especially in Chiang San, where I come from. It's near Golden Triangle. So I put a lot of artists, who work around the ideas of Golden Triangle, the Zomia, drug trafficking, opium, and this kind of travel borders stuff. And when we asked them, when we trained the docent, it was so easy for them to talk about their own place, and that this is what artists respond, to what happened here. And at the beginning, when I started to open for the docent, there's a lot of old people. And so why do you, actually I want the students, right? I said, no, we don't have a lot of students, but we have a lot of retired, people over 60 years old. And at the end, it was so cool, these people, because they were teachers, and some of them are like, they are part of the historical kind of club, of that area. And it was so interesting to see that exhibition making for Biennale is totally different from museum. And why do we have Biennale before we have museum, National Museum institution? Because Biennale do something that the museum cannot do, right? And especially the museum, they work with collection. And of course, we don't have a lot of collection. I mean, cool collection, like, we are not that as rich as this guy.
Not me, per se.
So that's like, okay, I don't want to make fun of Singapore. So that's why I think the Biennale can replace, those kind of the variety of visual arts, the artworks that, we want to show to our people. And of course, we welcome arts community. And sometimes the art community complain, oh, it's so easy access. It's like, come on, this is, Biennale is not like exhibition in the white wall, right? Because it's totally different. That's why I really love crochet. You even have student Biennale. I will copy you.
Personally,
I really have to quote Superflex. If value, then copy.
Yeah. Imitation is the best form of flattery. Okay, we will take 3 questions because we love the number 3. And then we will sort of let some responses happen. So you've got the mic, Charlene, so you start first.
Okay. I was actually have penned down a note, and I don't want to make any mistakes when speaking. I'm actually talking about finding hope in times of distress. I'm going back to the point that Pratik introduced to all of us yesterday, which was the emotional core of why we've gathered here, to remember as workers in the arts. So this is actually in part gratitude, in part a question, and a self-reflective critique for all of us. Yesterday, when we were at the Alipur Outpost seeing Prabhakar's amazing exhibition, a couple of artists and I, we stood to take a selfie. And we were wondering, well, where do we stand? Where's going to be a better picture angle? And both those artists just jokingly told me, how does it matter? Artists are ending up in jail, right? This is an appropriate place to take a selfie. It was not told in joke. It was not ironic. We were actually distressed. And all of the artists and I looked at each other and we're like, okay, this is where we are. And so in that, actually in collective, it's a question to all the curators. And I wanted to think of who in particular to ask this to, but all of you all actually touched upon aspects of this. So we as curators wouldn't be here if our artists are not. And as we sit here, there are so many things to tear our hearts over and worry about, with the most immediate being a hunger strike in Delhi, which is getting the attention of the country right now because of state violence that took place 2 hours to 3 hours ago. And while that is occurring, something far more closer to home, to me in particular, is the demand for the immediate release of artist Shishri Gupta, theatre worker Akriti Chaudhary, and other activists and workers arrested since April 11th in Noida and Uttar Pradesh. As cultural practitioners, meetings have been organized, protests have been participated in, and are continuing. A petition is ongoing, which has been drafted by Shuddha through a collective meeting that we organized, and will be available for all of you to sign in should you want to, but please, I really do request that we all do. One of the biggest things that is under deep danger is the way of the artist to live as an artist itself in this country. It is the being of the artist that is being threatened, and it is threatening to the powers that be, or seductive and convenient enough for the state to punish and create a distraction. Most importantly, the art world and our larger world in general continue. So how do we find hope in a country which is at once host to such brave people who can speak such truth to power, but also have such severe censorship, lack of freedom of expression, the duality and the hypocrisy of it, the imbalance of freedom being made easier for the privileged few and not for the many? The Hub every year does restore a bit of faith and resilience, so I do thank these efforts. But my overarching question remains, how do we find hope? Is there hope in our work? Why are we doing this? Because especially as culture workers, curators, thinkers, working and engaging in the arts in public and private spaces where one endangers the other, we are actually part of both. And sorry, my name is Shalini Nodwan. I'm an independent curator, and I have an exhibition opening next month that is about neighboring countries, and I'm more worried about the artists than actually the artworks. I'm more worried about the state. So obviously we want all your signatures. There's a QR code, which I'm so grateful that Priyanka and Pratik have allowed to be projected on the screen. And yeah, my overarching question was, how do we find hope at times like this?
Okay. Thank you for that. I want to just give the opportunity if someone wants to respond to that before we take other questions. Because, yeah, sorry, I can't see anything with this in my face.
And look, we took the tray.
Thank you. I'm Shuddha Vrata Sengupta from the Rux Media Collective. Since many people have brought us up, I don't feel the need to say anything as Rux today. That's been done. I'm just taking off from where Charlene left off. I want to say thank you all. I've had a great time listening. I don't get that many opportunities to listen, and I'm grateful for it. I know that Ratan Mol actually opened the proceedings by talking about Srishti and Akriti. Srishti, particularly, is an artist I know. I have mentored her in Shantiniketan with Chancha, and she has been her teacher. And for the last 4 years, she's been often in communication with me. And she's a wonderful, empathetic human being. I've written a lot about her, which you will find easily on The Wire. I've been to see her in prison a few weeks ago. She's very happy, cheerful, as can be. But the limited point that I want to make today is an observation made by the district judge of the Surajpur District Court in Noida while dismissing her bail application. And it's a fascinating insight into the time that we live in. It says she was, along with some others, present at a series of protests by industrial workers trying to demand a living minimum wage, which has not been revised 3 times. So it was a very reasonable demand. The government, in fact, partially agreed to it. So they can't say now that it was a demand that was unjustified. She was arrested illegally on the 11th of April because there are protocols of arrest. No woman could be arrested in this country without a woman police officer. That was not followed. No woman can be arrested after sundown. That was not followed. There are discrepancies about the date of the arrest because there was some harassment and possibly torture and sexual violence in the immediate evening of the arrest that the police have been evasive about. All that aside, you can read about all that in my long essay. Point that I want to make is what the district judge said. She said, Srishti Gupta is not a worker, and she's not an employee of any of the factories in Noida. What was she doing there? That, for me, is a very fascinating insight because it indicates that the judicial apparatus, or at least a part of it, thinks that if you're an artist, and it does mention that she's an artist, she was trained at Shantiniketan and so on and so forth, the police reports are full of that. If you're an artist, you stay in your studio in what Nikhil said, the terrible solitude of the studio. You do not engage with other people. You do not enter into an exercise of empathy or sympathy with anyone else. And that is precisely her crime. Her crime is the undertaking and the assumption of a position of solidarity and empathy, which I hope is something she learned from Shantiniketan and through the formation of her artistic education, that is what artists do. That is what artists have been doing for ages. And if that is now becoming a crime in this country, this is not a question of censorship. Her work and its content is not an issue. What is an issue is why was an artist on the street in the first place?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is an important thing for us to all think about as we move forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It reminds me
The petition has right now 1,887 signatures. It would be great if by tomorrow it would become 2,000, because we're then going to release it to the press. 2,000 is a nice round number.
That's good.
And more. More than
Yeah.
this.
Some years, I think, some years ago, Ashish Nandi had said something on the lines of that some of the worst atrocities and violence in the 20th century, at least, have been committed on aesthetic grounds of someone not being where they belong, someone not sounding right, someone not looking like they should be here, something not looking like it should be here or there or something like that. But to your question of hope, and it reminds me of Baldwin's interview when he was asked that, are you optimistic with the plight of racial violence in America? And he said that, it's a tragedy that I have to answer this. But I have to be an optimist because I'm alive. To be a pessimist means I've made life into an academic matter. And being optimistic is because I have to survive, and we have to survive for those to come. And so I don't think it's a matter of being hopeful that everything will be okay, but an insistence. And I think in this edition of The Hub, at least, we've seen a lot of insistent, determined kind of ways of dealing with whatever we find unjust around us through our practices, and in solidarity with artists, but also the publics.
And continuing to show up, I guess, in the places that we may not be seen by certain structures to be a part of. But I guess that is when we talk about solidarity, which we talk about quite a bit in many of our practices. I think it is, it's not just an exhibition subject or a theoretical idea. I mean, it is dangerous, but it is also significant. And I think if there is a presence that is constantly maintained, and we all practice that showing up as much as we can, I think there is some hope in that as well, right? I do want to take 2 more questions because I promised 3. And so I'm looking at this side of the room.
Yes. One.
Right.
It's that. Hi, this is Christian. I'm an independent researcher. And my question today is on the intersections of archiving, curating, and as Sabi said, research as practice on these intersections. So basically wanted to ask, what kind of objects do we curate, especially in these times? Because, decoloniality does not suit everyone, as we have seen with right-wing governments co-opting decoloniality in India. We have seen it. So my question is basically that we have seen even in our own country that when we curate, photograph, archive, collect, we often do that with the lens of upper class, upper caste aesthetics and politics. And we call that decoloniality, whereas it is not so, absolutely not. So, so my question is also this, that in relation to that what kind of objects do we curate, photograph as artistic practice, as authorship, where the objects do not always have a material legacy, a material history. For example, I'll give you an example, like leather. Leather can have a political memory. It has a huge historical material legacy. But when I have interviewed, because I work with sex workers, I've interviewed one sex worker who had been trafficked, with the kafala network, and she's now here, and she had traveled to Dubai and Bangladesh, and she has one leather bag with her. So this leather bag, when it comes to her history, does not speak about leather as the material history of the object. So the object here is very important, but not in terms of the materiality of leather,
but rather it kind of accommodates her own history, which is in the intersections of gender, labor, politics, and economy. So, but I have seen, a prevalence where objects are collected in terms of their material histories, which is very important. But I also want to ask, in these decolonial times, what is the kind of scope to kind of photograph, curate these artistic practices based on objects which do not necessarily speak of a collective political material history, which has personal intimate histories, but very much speak of politics. So this was my question. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let's take the last one. And then was looking in this part.
It's a long piece. So my name is Pradosh, and I am a researcher and academic as well. My interests lie in studying the history of circus. So I'll try and keep it short. I mean, it's partly theoretical and partly kind of, I was thinking, and thanks to Rishabh beside me, kind of invoked that word itinerancy. So I was kind of interested with this because we spoke of labor in different contexts. And of course, we have theoretical canons on artistic labor, but the idea of curatorial labor is kind of very interesting because on the one hand, curator is also coming from curare, to care for it. And, caring is on that fine line where not everything or not all practices of care always lead to the idea of labor within economic concepts like work. It's something beyond work. So my particular question in that regard is, have you encountered moments in your experiences where this idea of making something new, pushing the boundaries, doing the experimental, not always works in communities for whom, the idea of maybe an art is pure joy. So I say this from a context where I worked with retired circus performers, and we were thinking of, putting together something experimental to represent the community. But one dare say that from my perspective, I never had the experience of the community. And I was trying to put that together along with a few of us. And when this came together, as an idea, we kind of pitched it to the community itself. And they were like, no, but we don't come to, see a play to get intellectual opinions on our lives.
Yeah.
We are here to laugh. Please make us laugh. It can't be that, every time our stories make you laugh or cry at your own peril, and we can't get to laugh. So what I'm trying to get at is this very interesting moment of the political necessity of emotions as well within, because when my experience is that no question that we ask today will have one singular answer, just like academic discourse has taught us, because the experiences are so in my own understanding of human experience, it has been like all these theoretical canons have been kind of broken apart. So one of this is this idea of exploring emotions, in works, and sometimes I would not use the word failing, but having setbacks where communities don't really like it. How have you had experiences, that you can talk about?
Thank you. In a way, I think it's interesting because those questions also speak to each other. There's a question around kind of perhaps unlearning actually and education, as you described it, Sapati, in thinking about curating and what lies outside of it, what kind of material histories and perhaps preconceived notions we have to first work against, perhaps. Maybe that's not the right way to describe it, but if you want to...
Yeah, I was just actually thinking about, because we've talked about it briefly, about curating in terms of audiences, who are we doing these things for? And in part, I think increasingly, I'm sort of thinking much more about how do we start the conversation about what it is that we're going to curate with the people that it's intended for, as well as the people who will be involved in that process of making. And I kind of sort of think it's much more interesting to start from a dialogic point, to to consider what are the kind of histories or experiences that we want to articulate with the people that we believe it's for.
Yeah.
And so thinking about structures that allow for that. And then because I think there's a notion here of second guessing what we think people want us to show. The other thing I wanted to also just say, just in relation to like curating or exhibitions, maybe similar to what you said about not everything is an archive. Not everything needs to be curated. I just sort of think, we have to be careful, or at least I try to be careful with when I'm using the term curating, because I'm actually talking about a discipline and a way of structuring and thinking through.
Good callous.
I don't, there's so many things that use the word curating. You can curate everything these days, but are we doing actually mean selecting, or is there something else that's happening here? Because I think for me it's the process of there was a term today about this kind of collaging, or bringing elements or ideas or things together that might seem disparate but that have a relation. There is a kind of labor in considering the relationship between things and how that can be presented to the world. Not everything needs to be presented to the world. I just think there's sometimes so I just wanted to put that there, because I feel like I don't think we need to curate the world. There are other ways in which stories can be told, shared, and sometimes it's actually probably important for us also to recognize that there is a value also in forgetting. I think, there are certain traumas that our bodies actually sometimes are not ready for, and so that we have this technology for forgetting, and it's an important one. And it allows us to kind of continue. So I just wanted to put that there.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you for both the question.
Yeah.
And maybe I can just offer like one response to both. Your questions already carried the method. And that is to say that the concerns that you have can sit alongside all these other concerns. It's not that this is one method and that's the only way, right? There's that great John Berger line that it's so great that, the same story will never be told in the same way twice, right? So I think it's just to allow for all these other systems to also coexist. I'm not saying that they are equal, right? And as I said, I'm not foolish, I'm naive. So I think, they can coexist, I feel, in today's world. And there are so many platforms for us to do that without necessarily also relying on the traditional structures, which, I think a lot of our colleagues also spoke about. So I think there is hope in that regard. I don't know whether that is sufficient.
Talking about was actually something that took her out a little bit of the trauma, because that was given to her by her brother. Was before she crossed the bond with him. So that was not a symbol of a trauma, rather a symbol of something very personal and intimate, which gave her care and protection. So, but that also carried a long history of trafficking. So it's a complex object. I'm not talking about the material history of the leather bag here in this context. Like, of course, when we talk about that it's politicians, the leather becomes so important there. That is in that case, and that's very strong. But I'm just asking, what is the scope of kind of you in artistic practice, in photography, to racing in a researcher's practice? So talk about the stories of these kind of objects, which relate to the soul, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, as Mustafa said, the scope is really in the way that you create that narrative, and you don't have to call it curating. There might be methods and outcomes and manifestations of that story in many different registers that make sense for what you're trying to do with that object. I don't want this to end. But we are over time at this point.
Share food. We still got purpose of computer because I know it's good. We'll see that it's good.
Okay,
So, my personal experience. My name is Manas.
Could you sang?
Manas Acharya.
Yeah.
So during a documentary, I'm doing on the Madhubani art. So where I discover that what we in Madhubani, there is another style called Godna style. But Godna Madhubani is started in late 70s, early 70s this time. But those style actually was practiced by the tribals or what we call the Dalits in that region, because they are not allowed to draw the higher caste, gods and goddesses. So some of the upper caste artists, they actually report the government officials that they can't do it because they are Harijans. So they have started that Gotna style. What they are actually use is to tattoo on their body. So they took that styles and create the started the Madhubani art, what we call now the Gotna style Madhubani art. Just for in context of longevity and how the styles preserved or their kind of art production from the lower caste is carrying in a different way. So that's I wanted to share.
Thank you. And certainly there are institutions, certain museums as well, I'm thinking about, that have collections of material that actually have many stories like that may not be captured by the object label or the kind of master categorization of it, which is the kind of work that I think needs to be continue to be done in order to make those narratives much more visible and legible to publics, but also to understand these objects in their full complexity. One of the words that you didn't talk about, Mustafa, was storyteller, as one of your terms. But I think we'll come back next year with other curators as storytellers.
Others.
Thank you all so much for yet another incredible edition of the Hub. I do want to have the experimenter team stand again so we can really
Come on, team experimenter. Come on, go with work.
Yeah. Every good job. Good job.
Oh, there you go.
You know, to make space is a job by itself. And I think, you know, how Ratan has held the last 2 days, giving a possibility to just listen and hear and not really bring in an opposing perspective just for bringing that perspective. It really is something to learn, and we're constantly learning from you, Ratan. I mean, this is the most beautiful edition of the Hub. I don't know whether many people who've attended it for many years think so, but something magical happened over the last 2 days. And I don't know if your hearts are feeling full and heavy together. Ours certainly are.
Yes.
So thank you for being the most beautiful audience, the greatest set of speakers, the most beautiful relationships that we could have actually found within the conversations that were had. And even for the questions that each one of you brought up, including the ending, which, you know, as an organization, we hold really, really close. We stand for what we stand very closely with a lot of things that came up today, and we will continue to. And I think that sense of fearlessness is what we should all leave this room with.
Brilliant.
3 cheers for Team Experimenter. Okay, Pratik is saying no more words. There's a chance there'll be a tear right now. On that note, have a great evening, and please come back to all the exhibitions that are coming up, and to the Hub next year. It's going to be in the first week of August.
That's right.
Yeah. Good evening. My God. And to each one of our speakers, I mean, I couldn't even say a full-fledged thank you to each one of you, because it feels like a beginning, not an end of something. So please, please come back. It continues. This relationship with Kolkata needs to be built now.